Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Robert Mackalski. This is my co-author, Jean-Francois Belisle. We are PhD students from the Des Hotels Faculty of Management at McGill University. We're proud to present our study measuring the short-term spillover impact of a product recall on a brand ecosystem. More specifically, what we're looking at is if there's a product recall, how does that spill over into related categories? The key results from our study are the following. First off, negative spillover effects from a product recall are so strong that they can actually jump into a related category. The second finding is that there are limitations to how far those spillovers will actually spread. So over the next 20 minutes or so, we'll walk you through the game plan, which here in Montreal, so Gauthier, the general manager, likes to have a game plan for the Canadians to get to the results that he sought, so that's what we'll do here. The first question is, why should we care about this? We'll answer that. We'll go through the literature, some theoretical background, we'll take a look at the case studies, some results, and ultimately conclusions and further research. Why should we care? The motivation. Product recalls can affect and have affected the entire alphabet of companies, from Apple to Zenith. They affect all product categories, or can affect all product categories, from pet food to electronics to automobiles and curtains. And they're surging too. Why? Well, supposedly outsourcing has caused a lot more product recalls. As well, products are getting more and more complicated. The upshot of that is headlines like this: product recalls surged to a new high. Drug recalls, 300% increase in 2010. And for both businesses and consumers, it's a big deal. Toyota, the story on Toyota in Business Week had this as a headline: Toyota recall cost to exceed $2 billion. Maple Leaf, a Canadian issue here with the listeriosis product recall, the lawsuits affecting consumers alone were $27 million. Point is, their product recalls are surging, and also they're very expensive for companies. Which takes us to our main research question with that motivation. What is the impact of a product recall on a brand ecosystem? More specifically, how far do those spillovers spread in related categories of the recalled brand, competitor brands, and of private label brands? But to cue us up here on what a product brand ecosystem is, Jean-Francois.
So in terms of brand ecosystem, so a brand ecosystem is the interaction between brands and their competitors. So this can be illustrated by this 2x4 matrix, where we got as rows same category and related category. And if we take the example of Diet Coke, then we can fill this matrix with these brands. Actually, in our study, we're going to focus mainly on these three axes. So as Bob mentioned, recall brand, competing brand, and private label, and this is what we got in our data. In terms of what has been done previously, we decided to focus on literature review on product arm spillovers, which is a little bit broader than product recalls. So we highlighted three studies. First study, Mary Sullivan, 1990, Journal of Business. They studied the impact of the sudden acceleration problems on the Audi 5000. They used depreciation rate, which is based on the price and the demand. And at the end of the day, they find significantly negative results. They also tested for impact on other Audi models, such as the Audi 4000 and also the Audi Quattro. Same thing, negative significant impact. They also tested within the same category with BMW models and also Jaguar models, and they find no significant impact. So their conclusion was, brands within a family are affected but do not spill over to competitors. A more recent study, Michelle Rome and Alice Tybau, 2006, published in Journal of Marketing Research. They studied, it's a fake scandal of Burger King and how it spreads to the same category. It's the traditional fast food to McDonald's. So the focal brand, Burger King, was affected. McDonald's was also affected, but in another category, but quite related, Dairy Queen was not affected. So their conclusion, consumers' negative perceptions of one brand do spill over to their competitors. Another recent study, more in the marketing modeling literature, around Van Heerd, Christian Elson, and Marnik de Kim, 2007. They studied the impact of product recall of peanut butter due to salmonella in Australia and how it impacts other brands. So the Kraft brand was affected. The Eater brand, which is also owned by Kraft, was also affected. And the Sanatorium brand, which was the third player on the market, and it sounds like Sanitarium, which is a song by Metallica, rocked the hell out of this situation and gained some sales. So the conclusion was competitors can actually benefit from a poorly run product recall. A little bit of theoretical background. We highlighted two theories, similarity theory and also the dominance theory. So in terms of the similarity theory, so spillovers are most likely to occur among brands that are similar. So we can take this example with the Michel Roman and Alice Tybout case, when McDonald's is similar to Burger King and Dairy Queen is less similar. So this is why McDonald's was affected, but Dairy Queen was not. In terms of the dominance theory, so it stimulates a spillover between two brands are asymmetrical in nature. Let's take, for example, the Coca-Cola case. If Coca-Cola received negative news, then it should spill over to RC Cola. But if RC Cola received negative news, then it should not spread to the dominant brand, which is Coca-Cola. This is based on the contrast model of similarity, for those really familiar in psychology, by the late Amos Tversky. So this brings to our hypothesis. So first hypothesis, the product recall will have a negative impact on the recall brand in related categories. So this is related to similarity theory. Second hypothesis, the product recall will have a larger negative impact on the recall brand in the most similar related category compared to other categories. This is also related to the similarity theory. Thereafter we got contradicting hypothesis, and this is related to the fact that the two theories bring different results. So first, product recall will have a negative impact on competing brands in the most similar related category. This is related to dominance theory. And the other one related to similarity theory is the opposite, so no effect. Another conclusion related to private labels. So product recall will have a negative impact on private labels in the most similar related category. And the opposite for the similarity theory, so no effect. So I'm going to pass to Bob for the Land O'Lakes case.
So this is the case we looked at to study the product recall issue. Land O'Lakes, America's leading provider and producer of dairy products, margarines, butters, and dairy byproducts, had a product recall of 1 pound salted butter sticks. There was a voluntary product recall based on this. The sticks of butter may have contained little bits of metal fragments. It affected 125,000 plus consumer units of the bricks of butter over 22 states, and we received a lot of press, including the Chicago Tribune. These are the states that are affected, highlighted in red. You can see the prominence of the recall in the southeastern United States, as well as in America's heartland. Bring to your attention, for example, Los Angeles, California, Boston, Massachusetts, not affected. Chicago and Minneapolis were affected in terms of cities. So, how do we do this and study this? We went to the IRI marketing database made available by Gronenberg, and we extracted dairy butter-related categories: butter blends, margarine, vegetable spreads, and butter sprays. We did that for 4 cities: 2 that were affected by the recall, 2 that were not affected by the recall. Minneapolis, Chicago affected, LA, Boston not affected. We pulled 8 weeks of data from June 30th until July 26th, pre-recall, July 28th to August 24th, post-recall. 8 weeks were selected consistent with what Van Heerd did in their peanut butter study and their short-term lens when they were looking at that. We used a difference in difference model to look at this, to study this. Difference in differences model have been used extensively in economics to pattern exogenous variables and shocks, and difference in differences model is just starting to get some traction in marketing. What it means specifically is that what you do is you take two places that, we took two cities that were affected by the product recall, Chicago, Minneapolis. We compared the sales there after the recall against before the recall, and then we compared that against the two cities that were not affected by the product recall, sales after, sales before. That's a theoretical underpinning of the difference in differences model. We used a standard difference in differences approach. We were modeling our dependent variable as units of sales, and the coefficient that's most important for us to look at is beta 3, which looks at the interaction of city, the recall city, and the post-recall time. These are the descriptive variables, just to highlight a few that are here. Number one, we control for sales over time for the brand, as well as sales over time of the competing brands. Promotion, advertisement, coupons also can affect sales, so those were included in our model. So, as Jean-Francois mentioned, there are 4 hypotheses, and guess what? We have 4 models. So, what our models were, the impact of the Land O'Lakes butter recall on all Land O'Lakes related categories, the impact of the Land O'Lakes butter recall on Land O'Lakes most similar category, which we consider that to be margarine, which is interchangeable with butter, impact of the butter recall on branded competitors, Parquet, I can't believe it's not butter, Blue Bonnet, Parmalat in margarines, and same thing with private label. So, what we have for our results, if we take a look at the adjusted R-squared, they linger around 0.6 up to 0.7, so the models fit nicely. And our first result here, we see this is our beta 3 coefficient. We see a negative 0.17 coefficient there, which is significant, indicating that the product recall adversely affected sales. We also take a look, model 1 of course is Land O'Lakes, butter recall on all Land O'Lakes related categories. Model 2 relates specifically to Land O'Lakes margarine. Our hypothesis is that we expected that to be even greater effect, and sure enough the coefficient is even larger and statistically significant. We ran a t-test and indeed confirmed hypothesis 2 is correct, is supported. If we take a look at model 3, competing products, we see no significance. We look at private labels, we again see no significance there. So, our overall results here based on the conclusions, the results, spillovers impacted the overall Land O'Lakes brands. On our hypothesis 1, which is really a support of the similarity theory, that's supported. Hypothesis 2, again, the more similar margin category, spillovers impacted. The Land O'Lakes margarine even stronger. Support for our hypothesis. Then going against the two theories that were pitted against one another, dominance theory and similarity theory, the results are that branded competitors did not receive spillover effects. That goes against the dominance theory, so that's not supported. At the same time, that result suggests support for the hypothesis 3B. And then when we go to the private label models, again, the dominance, not supported, but the similarity theory, it suggests support for that. So, with that, some conclusions.
So in terms of conclusions, first conclusion, we got 4 main conclusions. So first, some brands within a brand ecosystem are more at risk than others. That's the main finding. The impact of a product recall seems to be immediate. So we got a 4-week window. So we got some significant results. So that's it. We saw something immediate. Also, consumers think in terms of brands, not categories. So that's one of our main findings. So a house of brand strategy may be more advantageous than a branded house strategy. So this is based on David Acker's book. So, I mean, this is confirming these theories. Also, similarity theory versus dominance theory. We always have support for similarity theory, but not for dominance. So this can be linked to the fact that we got butter, which is a necessity product. In terms of future research, so we can do some robustness checks, notably on duration. So we tested for 4 weeks. We can test also for 3 to 5 weeks. Other cities in our difference models. Also other formats. We put sticks and tubs together. Maybe dividing them can give different results. We don't think so. But also in terms of brands, what's the impact on Parmalat? What's the impact on Parquet? Also other recalls can be studied. This is a best case scenario. More serious recalls, such as the Maple Leaf 1, can be studied. Also more brand ecosystem exploration, let's say that 8 cases. We got data for that. Also recovery and rehabilitation can be studied. There's already a study popping right now by Aral Van Heer and colleagues on how to leverage the rehabilitation with marketing mix tools. So at the end of the day, thanks for your attention, folks. Enjoy Montreal. We are Bob Mackalski and Jean-Francois Belisle, and merci beaucoup.
Comments or suggestions? Please.
Just one question. Where do you factor in the brand response to this model, and the way that the organization handles product recall, and the way that they communicate the product recall to the consumer? Because do you...
Okay, in terms of this recall, Land O'Lakes, first of all, JF mentioned at the end there that this is the best case scenario of a product recall. Nobody was hurt, nobody got sick from it, and the other thing is we scoured, all the conventional, press and online blogs to see if there was some mishandling of it. It seems that Land O'Lakes handled this meticulously in terms of involving the FDA, in terms of involving their suppliers. It almost is a case study of how to effectively handle a product recall. And given that, it even adds to the power of our findings here too, that even with the best possible case handling of a product recall, those results are still there. Do you have anything to add, Jay? Did I answer your question? Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question that is, do you think the characteristics of the brand category actually affect what you see? Let's say a brand category that is new, would we see the same effect? Or a brand category that has products that are complex, would that generalize over several categories that have different characteristics?
Okay, so if there's a category, let's see if I got this right.
Like, let's say with the butter, it's an older category we're familiar with, and it is not very complex. So we're kind of used to that. Do you think with other categories that are, let's say, cars, computers, that are more complex, that we might not understand, or that might not have been in here for a long time, would there be an effect?
Take that over me. Okay. Well, first off, I think that's a great point and a great area of future research in terms of the complexity of the product, because this really is a baseline, simple case on that. We didn't look at that yet, but what we did take a little bit of a investigation on, or put some thought behind, is comparing a luxury product versus a necessity product. And in terms of our thought process around that is that if this is a necessity product, then people will the brand will eventually just be so eroded if there's taint to it, people will just shift over to a private label and substitute in that regard. If it's a luxury product, that they don't actually need product, maybe they're stepping away from it, and it may damage the entire category and have even a greater spread. So perhaps with a complicated product too, that type of thinking would be aligned. Well, this is pretty complicated stuff. If it messes up here, it's probably going to mess up here. It's certainly, I'm actually going to jot that down for future research. Jay, do you have anything to add?
Do you have evidence on Land O'Lakes? Is it a dominant brand in this category, or is it?
Land O'Lakes promotes itself as America's leading producer of butter, margarine, milk, and milk products. So one thing we want to look at is market share, particularly in 2003, to have further evidence for that. But as of yet, we don't have that. We only have what the collateral says. And in the United States, it is a very prominent brand, we will say that. Anything to add?
Well, actually, we got it in data, and it's the dominant brand. If you look at, and if we look at the data, in terms of if we calculate the market share in the data, it's the dominant brand.
Okay, so you didn't need that. It's true.
I'm interested in hearing more about your DD methodology, and the reason I ask is because you mentioned that in Chicago, Minnesota, it was affected, but in LA and Boston, it was not. If a McDonald's in Kansas City was affected by something, people in LA are still going to shy away from going to McDonald's in their own area. So was that controlled in some way, or because if there's a big popular news about this product that's affecting Chicago and Minnesota, people in LA and Boston, for a prominent brand like this, will hear about it, right? So is there any effect that's going on?
Actually, it's really conservative test. So if there's really an effect on in Los Angeles, even because maybe of national news,
Right.
this means that there's even a bigger effect in Minnesota.
Right.
So it's conservative testing. So that's the methodology. That's how it works.
So, but is there an assumption implied there?
Yeah, it's like your control group actually.
Okay. So,
It's your control group, so the cities needs to be similar.
How long did you look after the incident arrived?
4 weeks before and
And
4
4
weeks
weeks
after, which is consistent with precedent set in another study.
And are you interested in going further? Because I've read that, for example, in Maple Leaf, you saw a strong decline after what happened, and like a year after that, they were higher than before the incident. So it's really.
There's two things I think we want to do here. One of them is to expand the 4 weeks. Jean-Francois mentioned like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, just the overall robustness of this study. But also what's very interesting is what does that recovery look like? What happens in the medium term?
Yeah.
What happens in the long term? And those are definitely directions that we want to take this line of thinking and research.
Any more questions?
One last, what do you do if this happens? Do you do the best you can and you're still in terrible shape?
What happened?
What happens? Yeah, that's a whole other, that's a genie right there. If you come up with that, man,
Okay, avoid making
a lot of money. Yeah, you're making a lot of money. A lot of money.